Hong Kong, March 1971, at 7:40 in the evening. The restaurant is known as the Golden Pavilion and has been proudly serving authentic Cantonese cuisine for over 11 years. Situated on the corner of Nathan Road and Haipong Road in Tsim Sha Tsui, it is not the kind of establishment you are likely to stumble upon in any tourist guide. It is the kind of place that has become a genuine part of the daily rhythm of local residents, who, after just a single visit, have made the quiet decision to return on a regular basis. The tables are packed closely together, as is almost always the case in truly busy restaurants, because the owner understands all too well that empty space between tables is simply money left sitting on the floor. The walls carry the warm color of aged ivory. Red paper lanterns, some more faded than others, hang loosely from the ceiling above. The sounds drifting out from the kitchen at the back are clear and unmistakable, the clatter of woks, the sharp sizzling of hot oil, the distinctive rhythmic noise of a kitchen operating in full swing on a Friday evening. The place is packed tonight, not with the artificial bustle of some trendy new spot, but with the organic, unhurried energy of a place where people genuinely and willingly want to be. Every single table is occupied. There are 2 people standing and waiting patiently at the entrance. The air hangs thick and heavy with the rich aromas of roast duck and fresh ginger, alongside the continuous, muffled murmur of roughly 40 people immersed in the quiet and particular intimacy that only shared meals can create. Bruce Lee is seated at a corner table beside the window with his wife, Linda, and their 6-year-old son, Brandon, who has spent the last 10 minutes carefully arranging his chopsticks into geometric patterns across the surface of the tablecloth. With the kind of intense and focused concentration that small children dedicate entirely to projects that matter only to themselves, Bruce watches him do this with the calm expression of a man who finds the world's smallest, self-appointed engineer genuinely and completely fascinating. Linda is studying the menu, despite the fact that she has ordered the exact same dish every single time they have visited this restaurant, and will almost certainly order it again tonight. Bruce is dressed in a plain dark jacket worn over a simple white shirt. No jewelry, no particular attempt to stand out from the crowd or to disappear into it. He has been in Hong Kong for 3 weeks now, shooting additional footage for an ongoing film project. This dinner marks the first free evening in 4 days that has not been tied directly to a production schedule of some kind. He looks like a man who is entirely and sincerely happy to be sitting in a warm and familiar room surrounded by the people he loves most. He does not glance toward the door when it opens at 7:43 p.m. The man who steps inside is named Derek Caulfield. He is 29 years old, stands 1.88 meters tall, and weighs in at 120 kilograms. He is an American originally from Columbus, Ohio, to be entirely precise, who has been living and working in Hong Kong for the past 8 months as a subcontractor for a civil engineering firm responsible for constructing drainage infrastructure across the new territories. He carries the build of someone who has made bulk a personal philosophy rather than merely a sport, the kind of physique that does not develop by accident, nor without a sustained and very specific obsession devoted entirely to its own construction. His broad shoulders fill the doorway in such a way that the hostess takes an involuntary half-step backward before quickly regaining her composure. He is accompanied by 2 colleagues, both American, both physically imposing, both carrying that particular relaxed nonchalance of men who have been drinking steadily for 6 hours and have arrived at that comfortable middle ground, somewhere between easy sociability and complete carelessness. They speak loudly in the way that certain men speak loudly when they find themselves in a foreign country with the volume of people who have never once had to adjust themselves to a room, because it has always been the room that adjusts itself to them. The hostess guides them toward a table near the center of the restaurant. Caulfield pulls out his chair with considerably more force than the situation requires. His feet scrape across the floor with a noise that carries clearly across at least 6 tables on either side of him. Several nearby diners look up briefly. Caulfield either does not notice or notices and determines that it simply does not matter, which, to him, amounts to precisely the same thing. He settles into his seat and slowly scans the restaurant with the unhurried deliberateness of a man inspecting a space he has already decided to occupy fully. His gaze sweeping across the room like a slow spotlight, not searching for anything in particular, simply making it known that he has arrived and that the room ought to take note of that fact. His gaze passes over Bruce Lee's table without recognition at first. Then it stops, returns. He studies the table for a brief moment, then leans toward the colleague seated on his left and says something quietly. The colleague turns to look in the same direction. Both men regard Bruce Lee's table for a moment before exchanging a glance between themselves. The colleague responds. Caulfield laughs. It is the laugh of a man who has just delivered a joke he personally considers genuinely clever, and who feels quite satisfied with himself for having thought of it. Bruce Lee is carefully carving a portion of roast duck for Brandon and does not look up. The first incident takes place at 7:51. Caulfield has ordered beer. 3 bottles, 1 round. They arrive at the table with the kind of speed that restaurants typically reserve for customers who appear likely to keep ordering more. He is in the middle of telling a story to his colleagues, something about a job site over in Kowloon. His voice carries at a volume that might have been perfectly appropriate for the bar they departed from an hour ago, and is now roughly 40% too loud for the current room. The tables nearest to him have made the small and unconscious adjustments that people instinctively make whenever a disruptive presence enters. A shared space, conversations drawn slightly inward, chairs shifted by small degrees. The invisible geometry of the room, quietly rearranging itself around a new and unwelcome variable. A waiter passes Caulfield's table, carrying a loaded tray of food intended for the table directly behind him. The waiter appears to be no older than 19, slight in build, moving with the careful and practiced efficiency of someone navigating a fully occupied restaurant during peak evening service. He passes within roughly 18 inches of Caulfield's chair when Caulfield extends his arm outward without looking. The casual, automatic gesture of a man flagging down a passing taxi, and the waiter stops. Because stopping is the only available alternative to the tray making direct contact with the outstretched arm. More beer, Caulfield says, and something to eat. What's good here? The waiter explains politely that he will send someone over shortly to take their order. His English is careful and precise in the particular way that a second language often is, each individual word placed with quiet and deliberate attention. Caulfield watches him speak with an expression of exaggerated and theatrical patience. Speak slower, Caulfield says. I can't follow you when you talk like that. The waiter repeats himself at the same measured pace, because his pace was already perfectly clear, and slowing it down further would accomplish nothing except to make the interaction more openly humiliating for one of the two people involved. He has apparently decided that this is not something he is prepared to do. He finishes, turns, and continues on toward the table he had originally been serving. Caulfield watches him walk away. Then he turns back to his colleagues and says something. Both men laugh. The colleague seated nearest the window glances briefly around the restaurant in the way people do, when they are quietly checking whether what just occurred was noticed by anyone nearby. Several diners at the surrounding tables are now studying their food with the very specific and focused concentration of people who have just witnessed something they wish they had not, and have resolved that not reacting is the simplest and least complicated response available to them. Bruce Lee is listening. He has not looked up from his table. Brandon is in the process of explaining something to Linda about the completed chopstick arrangement, a detailed explanation that requires the active use of both hands and a considerable degree of personal conviction. Bruce is fully aware of the explanation unfolding before him, and equally aware of the table 15 feet away, holding both with precisely the same quality of quiet attention. He does not appear to be dividing it between the two. It is simply the natural attention of someone whose awareness of a room requires no visible effort whatsoever. Linda catches his eye for a brief moment across the table. He gives her a small, almost entirely imperceptible shake of his head. Not yet, not this. She holds his gaze for just a moment, then gently returns her attention to Brandon's ongoing architectural presentation. The second incident occurs at 8:09. The restaurant has filled even further in the 20 minutes since Caulfield's arrival. The line waiting at the front has grown to 4 people. The ambient noise has risen in the natural and gradual way that restaurant noise rises. On a busy Friday evening, each occupied table contributing its own small portion to a collective warmth that makes the room feel genuinely alive rather than simply occupied. Caulfield's table has by now received its food. He eats with the appetite of a large man who trains seriously and treats meals as fuel problems requiring solutions, rather than experiences meant to be savored. He eats quickly and without paying much deliberate attention to what he is actually consuming. His focus remains fixed on the ongoing conversation with his colleagues, which has drifted through several different topics with the loose, wandering energy of men who have been drinking steadily for a number of hours. The family seated at the table directly beside Caulfield's consists of a grandmother, her adult daughter, and 2 children, both under the age of 10. They have been there since well before Caulfield arrived, eating quietly together with the relaxed, self-contained ease of people who visit this place regularly and feel entirely at home within it. One of the children, a boy of perhaps 8 years old, reaches across the table toward a serving dish at the precise moment that Caulfield shoves his chair back to stand up, and the chair leg catches the boy's stool with enough force to knock it sideways. The boy grabs the edge of the table and does not fall, but the serving dish tilts sharply, and a portion of its contents spills across the tablecloth rather than remaining inside it. The grandmother lets out a sound of alarm. The mother reaches instinctively for the boy, checking him over with the automatic, breathless panic of a parent whose child has just been in close proximity to something large and entirely uncontrolled. Caulfield looks at the scene before him. He has not sat back down. He is standing at his full height, surveying the family's table with the measured expression of a man attempting to determine whether he is genuinely required to engage with any of this. He is not, he decides. He turns in the direction of the back of the restaurant toward the restrooms. As he turns, he says it, not loudly, not quietly, but at the very specific volume of a man who fully intends to be heard by those immediately surrounding him, and remains entirely comfortable with the possibility that his words may carry somewhat further than that. He says it to no one in particular, directing it vaguely toward the disrupted table, in the unhurried tone of a man explaining something he considers mildly and self-evidently obvious. These people, he says, no sense of space. All crammed in together like they don't know any better. He says it with the casual and untroubled assurance of someone who has said things very much like this before, in spaces very much like this before, and has never once been called upon to account for any of them. He continues walking toward the back of the restaurant. Behind him, the grandmother is looking at her daughter. The daughter is looking down at her own hands. The boy who nearly fell has gone completely still, in the particular way that children go still when they sense that the adults around them are quietly managing something difficult. And that silence is the single most helpful contribution available to them. Bruce Lee sets down his chopsticks. He places them carefully, parallel to one another, on the edge of his bowl, with the same quiet deliberateness he applies to everything. He looks across at Linda. She is already looking back at him with the expression of a woman who has been married to this particular man for 5 years and understands with complete clarity exactly what that gesture means. He says quietly, "I'll be right back." She nods once. He stands up. The restaurant does not know what is coming. That is the thing about moments like this. They do not announce themselves. There is no shift in the quality of the light, no change in the temperature of the room, no sound that distinguishes the 30 seconds before everything changes from the 30 seconds that came before that. The woks are still clattering steadily in the kitchen. The lanterns are still hanging from the ceiling at their various stages of fading. The room near the window still holds 40 people eating and talking and pouring tea and reaching unhurriedly for shared dishes with the relaxed, familiar ease of a Friday evening that has been proceeding exactly as Friday. Evenings in this restaurant have always proceeded for 11 years, and yet something has changed. It is not yet visible. It is the particular kind of change that exists in the interval between a decision and the consequences that follow from it in the space between a man rising from his table and the moment the room fully understands why Bruce Lee moves through the restaurant toward the back corridor with the same unhurried economy he brings to everything he does. He is not walking fast. He is not walking with the forward, purposeful lean of someone being driven forward by anger. He moves the way water moves, finding the path of least resistance through the tables and chairs and waitstaff and the ambient, shifting geography of a full and busy restaurant. Each small adjustment of his body precise and automatic and entirely without performance or theater. 3 People notice him stand and begin to move. The waiter who was insulted nearly 20 minutes earlier, who is clearing a table near the back of the room and looks up briefly, going still for just a moment before quietly continuing his work. The hostess near the front entrance who catches the movement in her peripheral vision and watches for a moment until something in the particular quality and direction of Bruce's movement causes her to stop merely watching and begin genuinely paying attention. And the grandmother at the disrupted table, who follows Bruce with her eyes as he passes, her expression carrying something complicated and difficult to name. Not hope exactly, not relief exactly, but the particular practiced alertness of someone who has spent an entire lifetime learning carefully to read situations, and is reading this one with great care. Brandon is still explaining something to Linda. His small hands are moving in the shapes of whatever structure he is assembling in the air between them. Linda is nodding with the full and undivided attention that the present moment requires of her, because the moment requires it, and she is providing it in a way that costs her nothing visible to anyone watching. Bruce reaches the back corridor. It is narrow, serving as a passageway connecting the main dining room to the restrooms, roughly 3.5 meters in length. It is lit by a single pendant light that has been operating at approximately 80% of its full capacity for several weeks now and has not yet been replaced. The walls on either side sit close enough together that 2 people passing in opposite directions must make deliberate room for one another. Framed photographs line the left-hand wall, old Hong Kong. The harbor as it appeared in the 1950s, a busy street market, a fishing junk moving under full sail in the western anchorage. These photographs have hung there since the day the restaurant first opened and have long since acquired that particular quality, unique to objects that have occupied the same space long enough that they seem, after a while, to have simply grown there. Caulfield comes out of the restroom just as Bruce steps into the corridor. He occupies the corridor as he occupies most spaces, completely, and with the entirely unself-conscious ease of a man who has never once had to stop and wonder whether his physical presence might be intruding on a space shared with others. He is drying his hands with a folded paper towel, his eyes still directed downward toward his hands, not yet aware that the narrow passage stretching ahead of him contains anything deserving of his particular attention. He takes 2 steps forward before looking up. He stops. He studies Bruce for a moment with the expression of a man conducting a quick and entirely automatic physical assessment. The assessment takes approximately 2 seconds. It yields the same result it has always reliably produced when applied to a man of this size standing in this kind of space. The calculation is simple. It has always been simple. 70 kilograms. 1 meter 67. Functional arms, but nothing that registers as exceptional. A man who, according to every physical and social calculation Caulfield has spent 29 years quietly refining, should step to the side in a narrow corridor and allow the more imposing figure to pass through without incident. Bruce does not step aside. He stops, approximately 2 meters from Caulfield, and regards him with the total unhurried attention of someone who has arrived at a specific place for a specific reason and is in absolutely no hurry to begin. There is nothing aggressive about his posture. His hands rest loosely at his sides. His weight is evenly and naturally centered, as it always is, which reads as simple stillness to those who do not know what they are actually looking at, and as something else entirely to those who do. His expression is calm. Not the manufactured calm of someone actively working to suppress what they are feeling, but the genuine, settled calm of a man who has already moved through the emotional dimension of this encounter and come out the other side, while he was still seated quietly at his table. Caulfield regards him for a moment. Then something resembling a form of recognition passes across his face, not recognition of Bruce specifically, but recognition of the situation itself. The recognition of a man who has spent enough time in physical confrontations to understand, somewhere beneath conscious thought, that something in this particular quality of stillness is different from the stillness he has always encountered in men of this build and this stature. His chin lifts slightly. His shoulders pull back and straighten. The automatic, unconscious adjustment of a body that is not frightened, but has registered at some level below deliberate awareness that the variables present in this situation are not quite behaving in the way they were expected to. He decides it does not matter. "You're in my way," he says. His voice is level and steady, the voice of a man who has learned over the full course of 29 years that stating things produces results, while asking them rarely does. Bruce does not move. He continues to look at Caulfield with the same complete, undivided attention he has given him since the moment he first entered the corridor. When he finally speaks, his voice carries that particular quality of a man who has already reduced a complicated situation down to its most essential elements, and now presents those elements clearly, without embellishment or unnecessary decoration. "I heard what you said out there," says Bruce. "To the waiter. To the family at the table beside yours. I heard all of it." Caulfield's expression shifts slightly. Not guilt. Not embarrassment. Something closer to the mild, low-level irritation of a man who has been interrupted on a subject he already considers fully settled and closed. "I wasn't talking to you," says Caulfield. "No," says Bruce. "You. We're talking about people who had no way to answer you back. That's a different thing entirely." "It isn't courage?" "It is arithmetic." Caulfield looks at him for a long moment. The corridor is very quiet. The sounds from the kitchen and the main dining room reach them muffled and present, yet distant, like something occurring in an entirely separate world. Somewhere out in the restaurant, a child laughs, a high-pitched, completely unrestrained laugh, and the sound seems to belong to a version of the evening that has nothing whatsoever to do with the one currently occupying this 4-meter-long corridor. "I don't know who you are," says Caulfield, and this particular sentence carries a very specific weight, for it is not merely a statement of ignorance. It is an implication. The implication being that whatever answer exists to the question of who Bruce Lee actually is will not alter the outcome of the next 60 seconds in any meaningful way, and that Caulfield is entirely comfortable with that, and that Bruce ought to understand this clearly and conduct himself accordingly. Bruce considered this for a moment with what appeared to be genuine and sincere attention. "Very well," he said. "Who I am is of no importance to what I am about to tell you. Here's what I am going to tell you. You are going to walk back into that dining room. You are going to apologize to the waiter whose English you mocked and whose time you wasted without a second thought. You are going to apologize to the family whose meal you disrupted and whose grandmother you insulted. You are going to do all of this calmly and without making any kind of scene. Then you are going to finish your dinner and you are going to leave. That is what is going to happen." He says it the way a man reads aloud the terms of a written agreement. Not like a threat, not like a challenge, like a calm and courteous description of the future presented in advance. As a matter of simple courtesy, Caulfield stares at him. The calculation is performed again, faster this time, because the first calculation produced a result that his mind is not quite prepared to accept as a basis for how he should proceed. 70 kilograms. 1 meter 70. The corridor, the distance between them, the roughly 2 meters of linoleum separating a man who weighs 52 kilograms less than him from the conclusion of this conversation. He smiles. It is the smile of a man who finds the situation almost amusing, And that almost is doing all the weight-bearing work in what follows. What exactly are you going to do? He says. Little man? The final two words land in the corridor with the very specific gravity of words that have been chosen and deployed precisely to belittle, to diminish, to take a man and make him smaller than his actual dimensions within the space he physically occupies. Caulfield has used words like these before, in spaces like this before. They have always performed the function he intended them to perform. They create distance. They establish a hierarchy. They remind the smaller party of the physical reality of the room, namely, that he is smaller, and that smaller has always meant something, and that this something has never once worked in his favor inside a confined space with a man of Caulfield's size and stature, Bruce. Lee does not respond to these words in the way that words like these are specifically engineered to produce a response. He does not tense. He does not lean forward. He does not alter the quality of his attention, the position of his hands, or the distribution of his weight in any way that would be perceptible to a casual observer. He simply continues to look at Caulfield with the same absolute, completely unruffled calm he has maintained from the moment he first entered the corridor. And when he speaks again, the volume of his voice has not risen by a single measurable degree. I gave you a choice, says Bruce. It was a courtesy. The choice is over now. This is what happens in the 60 seconds that follow. Caulfield takes the first step. It is always like this with men like Caulfield. For men like Caulfield have learned over many years that taking the first deliberate step forward, when one is large, produces a very specific and reliable reaction in the smaller person standing opposite. An instinctive step back, a flinch, the retreat of a body that has recognized an imminent physical threat and is responding to the oldest instruction embedded in its operating system. He takes a long, committed stride forward and raises his right hand, palm open and flat, in a forward-pushing motion, a movement designed to cover the 2 meters separating them in a single, determined gesture, make firm contact with Bruce's chest, and drive him backward into the corridor wall with enough force to physically end the conversation before it has any opportunity to escalate any further. It is the move that has reliably ended most of the physical confrontations in which Caulfield has ever been involved. Not a punch, not a blow, a shove, a demonstration of raw mass, a translation of his 120 kilograms into a single moment of applied and overwhelming pressure that resets the social geometry of whatever space he happens to occupy, and reminds everyone present of what the numbers actually and unambiguously mean. The hand does not reach Bruce's chest. What happens instead is this dot in the fraction of a second before contact. Bruce's left hand moves. It does not block the incoming shove. Blocking would require force meeting force, mass meeting mass directly. And that is not the principle being applied here. What Bruce's left hand does is redirect. It meets Caulfield's wrist at the precise angle required to turn the force of the incoming shove not backward, but sideways, guiding the enormous, fully committed mass of Caulfield's arm along a path that its own momentum has already partially chosen, simply extending the arc slightly further, converting 265 pounds of forward conviction into 265 pounds of sideways imbalance. It requires no strength. It requires geometry. It requires the understanding that a body in committed motion is not a problem to be overcome by opposing it directly, but a resource to be carefully and precisely directed. Caulfield's own momentum carries his upper body forward and to the right. His center of gravity, which had been positioned squarely over his lead foot in preparation for the shove, is now ahead of that foot and moving in a direction his foot cannot follow without a significant and extremely rapid adjustment. The adjustment does not happen in time. In the moment that his weight is fully committed and his balance is already compromised, and his nervous system is still processing the information that the shove did not land where it was directed, Bruce's right foot moves. It is a front kick, not the large, power-generating kick that requires a full chamber and a firmly planted base and the visible, telegraphed preparation of a man who is conspicuously about to kick someone. It is a short, direct, linear strike, the kind that travels from its starting position to its ending position in a time frame that falls well below the reliable threshold of human visual tracking. It lands squarely in the center of Caulfield's solar plexus, at the precise anatomical location where the network of nerves responsible for managing the diaphragm is most accessible from the exterior of the body.